in Cape Town is way over here. Blombos cave is found in a niche right over here. This is where we're going to be looking. You can see the settlement, the way that it's built around, the flattened area. It's just up on an escarpment and built into a wall. They believe it may have had more of an overhang in previous times, and some of those rocks are chipped from there and fallen down the whole cliffside. You can see the water in the distance. Here they are archaeologically looking at the dig. And you can see the layers here and how they're pointing out certain things for the picture and talking about things they're hitting in the excavation right now at the level that they're at. They are at 100,000 years ago, and in the process they're finding these little tools, like what you see in her hand, a rub tool. And those are found all over North America too, as well as in Europe. And a lot of archaic sites leading from Europe to the New World. There's one of the lead archaeologists, and just want to point out here the layering that you can see that's done into this. This is believed to come down to 30,000 years. And there's a gap that does have a few, but not very much. And then a larger gap here, and they want to note that in this larger gap there's a lot of charcoal and soot and blackness mixed in down to this level to the flat that they're finding here, and that age, due to the charcoal, dates to 100,000 years, give or take 4,000. Now we found the Hofmeyr Site, and it has remnants too, but what we're seeing here, I want to show you, is an abalone shell, which is not even really native to this area so much. You can find abalone off the coast of South Africa. You can find it through Bali all the way through Australia. You can find them over in Japan a whole lot more, and then in the Americas, the better place to find them is on the west coast off of California, but you do find them off the east coast too. There's not really a sea that you don't find these in, but they are abundant in certain places. And what they're noting here and showing you is this patty that's inside of it, even though they haven't cleaned it quite well, and this patty that had come out of another shell laying separate of it, and that this patty is all made of a red ochre material already mixed with animal fats and other chemicals ready for use in their painting. You can also see churted pieces here just laying right up under this level that are flinted. Now here's the group that ended up doing this, but again, this is still Bay, South Africa. Now we were looking at a Hofmeyr site that dates to 40,000 years, that's over farther on the Cape, I would say more, well, it's 160 miles more eastward and inland some that they have. Now all of these sites are showing a weird thing of red ochre, and the Red Ochre Burials go back quite some distance. So that's the ochre at Blombos Cave. Now let's go on to another bit of information. It's ancient South America. Now they may look magnificent just as the way they are and the way that you see them now, but most of these beautiful monuments that we know of as in gray stone used to actually be colored. They were painted, they were plastered, and they had a different look to them entirely. We find chips of it and know this fact. Just like a lot of the ancient Sumerian temples were painted and they had colored bricks, things like that. There are other bright colors used, but red is apparently the special cultural color, and it has cultural or religious significance. And it seemed to be highly symbolic to these people in similar ways by numerous cultures of the Americas, such as the Mayan. They also use this same symbolic coloration that you see here. Whenever we look at European and old ancient Celtic times, they had red ochre burials. Palenque is an ancient city found about 500 miles southwest of Mexico. It's Mayan, and archaeological finds define it as a city that was occupied at least 500 BC. Now, that's what they put out straightforward, but it reached its peak in the 7th century AD under the rule of Pakal, also known as Pakal the Great, who came to the throne around 615 AD at the age of 12, it says, and he also lived for some 80 years, and when Pakal died about the age of 80, He was buried along with 5 or 6 human beings, human sacrifices, inside of a temple. And inside of this temple, under this large slab that was the floor plate on it, which itself is famous too for having the odd look like he was leaving the earth. In the rocket ship that you may know of in the UFO things, he was found with a jade mask and covered with a layer of red ochre. The tomb was rediscovered in 1952, but in 1994 they discovered what is known as the Tomb of the Red Queen. Now, she was an unknown nobleman at the time, possibly the wife of Pakal, and the name comes from the red remains in the sarcophagus here. If you'll look, it's completely covered with this red ochre and powder made of red ochre and cinnabar. Completely covered, covering the walls, and you can see that red painting itself, even on her skeleton and such, was a symbolic coloration. Now, this is the symbol that was seen on the plate, and everybody says this is him working a ancient astronaut. That the belief is that here's the exhaust coming out of it down here. He's sitting onto a machine. It even has foot pedals and things onto it. He's manipulating 2 knobs. He's breathing through an apparatus here, and the whole thing is going zoom right through the through the roof. He's taking off to space. He's going where the other gods had gone that were from long ago, and he would go to be with them in this manner. Now, symbolism shows you a lot of things. It can be a color. It can be an animal, stands for a meaning or a representation. It implies certain significance. Even color can be symbolic, such as purple, historically favored by kings and royalty as being, to signify royalty. Yet that's the Phoenician color, but we see the head and the crown, and the head and the crown chakra are also purple. Another color that's been used symbolically since prehistory at all is red ochre. Probably the earliest example of use is red ochre on burial sites that can be traced back to the Pleistocene, where Neanderthal man would cover their grave sites in iron oxide or red ochre. And many anthropologists believe that this practice was symbolic of a womb, and likely involved the ritual because of the bodies are always placed in what some call a sleeping or a fetal position, curled up. Even old Canaanite burials, they're all shown on their side, facing to the east, facing west, awaiting the new birth or a new dawn. So it should be facing east. And I put that in wrong. Unfortunately, Neanderthals were not credited with the deliberate, meaningful burial of their dead until much more later, more than a half century after the discovery of Neanderthals. So the idea that a lot of people that just have basic knowledge, they tell you that they're just ignorance. But Shenadar Cave Site in the Anders Hall said Neanderthals laid to rest with several different species of flower. Some had medicinal properties, and others were probably for smells and things like that. Beautiful things brought, like we still bring flowers to a burial now. Red ochre has also been used on Cro Magnon type burials. This ancient grave in Russia dates back to 30,000 years ago. You can see a shell hat on her, and how she's been totally sprinkled with this red ochre. The body itself may also be combined with something like animal fat, and they use that together for the property. Now, that's the same mode that was used in the piece we were looking at before, and it is the same in the Americas. So this constant knowledge of this one thing and this symbology is kind of odd. Now, they say it's symbolic of blood. It was ritualistic, maybe considered a magical rite of sorts, a shamanistic tradition, things like that. And they find this stuff even in the United States, and Canada has uncovered startling new evidence that previously unknown culture, more advanced than anyone previously believed or wanted to believe in, and still don't talk about. And they're on the edge of the Arctic Circle up north, right on the edge of where the continental ice shelf would have been. These guys here in Bangor, Maine, they had found near the Penobscot River a red ochre deposit that looked like there was really blood-colored pools were rising up out of the earth, and the man had been trying to plow that area and ran into this and said there's something weird about it. He stopped, and he went and got a hold of the local guy here as an antiquarian. He's really a historian and a part-time everything. Now, of course, he had weird archaic beliefs that a lot of people did, that these people had been here, and they were European explorers, had been here and recorded a fabled place called Norumbega, which they interpreted as a city overflowing with riches. Now, Norumbega is even shown on an old map here, and it seems to be at the riverfront. It's a 1569 map. It's near the mouth of Penobscot River near Hanlon. And this man searched for this, and he never seemed to find it. But once this man told him about the Red Ochre Site, he was extremely interested, and so that he had gone there. And they know that when they cleared the dense forest, they had found standing stones, a lot of different things like this, but never anything that could be called a city. There was groups of stones like this that's still shown here. And they could tell that they had been brought there. They had been stacked up on purposely. And then they started finding all these ancient burial mounds that you've seen some of my videos on already too, of these people and stuff. And they said, well, here it is carrying through time that they had these little mounds of rocks and things that they would bury over the top of people. And then inside these mounds would be people like this. You look at this hand and this rooster crow claw type thing here that's shown, eagle's claw, and this type of symbolism. And these are artifacts that are extremely well more advanced than any of the Indian tribes in the region that had or whatever. And so antiquarians explain this by developing the theory of a lost civilization that existed in the Americas before the Indians, and then they mysteriously vanished. These earliest mounds were simpler in circular forms, but then they broke out into a lot of things that have astrological significance into them, a lot of archaeoastronomy built into them, facing north, doing certain things like that. The burials that are with these people are still associated with a sideways burial, still associated with a fetal position, and facing to the east. It's a common thing, and it's weird, but you find it in 9,000-year-old Canaanite burials. You find it all up through Europe. You find it actually backing behind that up to 36,000, 38,000 years. And that led people to believe that here's how it is. People came over in old archaic times. Now, one thing I want to mention here is that people thought that, they must have come across the Atlantic instead of the Bering Ice Bridge. That's what we're all led to believe, the Bering Ice Bridge. But at this time, when the water level is low enough, 400 foot lower, it doesn't take an ice bridge to come across there. The whole land is exposed. Literally, Kamchatka Peninsula attaches to Alaska, and not by a few little dots of islands, but an entire stretch of land that is quite wide and quite out of the water. So he came to see these sites here, and whenever he noted them, there's the guy's plow right there. This is, of course, a reenactment type thing, but he was quite overwhelmed with what he saw there. He thought there was an unknown race of seafaring people who had lived here. Now, the evidence shows of seafaring because they have hooks, fish hooks. They have harpoons. They have deep water fish like swordfish that they've used the blades off of and things like that. There's a high grade of red ochre that's there that turned up, and whenever he started digging through it, he started finding weird artifacts. Now, some of these artifacts were odd shaped. This right here is a perfectly shaped plumb bob. An actual, what we would use as a plumb bob. It hung from a line. Now, you find that they use these for fishing, that they would also use them for finding level. And this is not something we can actually attach to American Indians in any way, shape, or form. Then you find these other tools here that have an incredible sharpness to them, a gouging and scraping tools and things. That indented slit edge they have on there doesn't match any Indian artifacts. It matches the mound builders, it matches the Nova Scotian artifacts, it matches the European artifacts, and all the way up into the edge of Russia, but on the western side of Europe and not up the other way where they're trying to tell you that it came from. After they investigated this more, they find that Willoughby was the guy that did it. They found that they were all arranged in these little setups, and that every one of them was associated with a pile of red ochre. So this has some type of significance to go with it too, and it all seems to attach together. He said the graves were so old and so long disintegrated that they couldn't find bodies there, and they checked the soil and it was acidic. Now, peat bogs and alkaline places hold bodies real well, and desert arid conditions dry them out like beef jerky and hold them real well like the Egyptians. But moist and acidic soils are just going to eat that up, and slowly but surely the skulls won't even be, evident after a few thousand years whatsoever. But this man here is known as a maverick to the area. He started going around and collecting, trying to find the origins of the mound builders way back when. His name was Moorhead, and he's searching for the origin of the mound builders. This little setup you see right here was actually taken to the World's Archaeological Fair that they had, and there's a few interesting facts that go with that. Look at this blade here that you see. It's made out of a solid chert, and it is a sword, literally a hand sword and dagger, and it's basically made out of a stone, but it's got an edge that you could still rub your finger down and get a cut off of, and if someone stabbed you with this, it'll kill you. Well, it's been broken in 3 places now and so on, but the oddity here is that this doesn't match anything in North America. It doesn't look like anything. It looks like a dagger from the medieval ages, and yet it dates back here some 7,000 to 8,000 BC. Now, off the coast of Maine, they found a lot more excavations, and then they found this type of chert and these arrowheads that are here that are not a Clovis style in any way, but predate that by almost twice the date. And they show something weird. They could not find where this came from. There's no archaeological evidence of the rock anywhere. So it took about 80 years later for them to find that this unusual stone is called Rama Bay. They found it in Rama Bay, northern Labrador, 1,500 nautical miles away across the sea. And this is where those blades came from. After excavation, they call it Ramachurt, and it is the only place on the planet that this actually matches up to. They can look at the composition of the stone, and they're going, unless there's some super hidden place somewhere, that's the actual origin side of it. And these sites you're seeing here in the picture all relate to this same type of chert. This Rama Bay chert comes from Labrador. Now, that's not a current thought at all. So they considered his claims to be too sensational, and some people dismissed the whole idea. No one had been here before Columbus and all that type of stuff, so they were not going to go away with that. Some people even said marauding Eskimos from the north came down, and they basically destroyed Moorhead's career at the end of that. And 80 years after his death was he only vindicated by information that is still now stifled. Even though it somehow vindicated him a little bit, that idea of people being here pre-Clovis or before 11,000 BC is not really allowed to be talked about. It's getting out. You've seen some of my videos and others that have this information out there, but they still want to act like, look at Blue Hill Bay here, and there's a shellfish deposit here that's 35 foot tall. Now, this is done after hundreds of years of people coming every year to this area during a certain time of year and farming all these shellfish and then throwing their refuge in one pile. And it made a giant heap. Now, this was kind of a sensation there, but they thought it was nothing big. They dug down through it and they found nothing. But somebody was smart enough to dig down farther and farther. And because one of the men thought, all of the shell here is going to be calcium and it's going to keep it from being acidic, and he was right. The disintegrated remains of these people facing in a fetal position, facing to the west, or under this mound here. They have found bone artifacts here that are creatures that are no longer in North America. They have designs on them made out of dots and then lined and then cut through, like connect the dots and then they scrape through. Swordfish bones, harpoons, toggling harpoons that toggle the end on them, which is not an archaic thing, but yet, they dated it, and then they found this stuff, and they go, well, no, there's swordfish there too, swordfish noses, the fish that has the large thing on the end of it, which the Maori even used as a weapon. What did these people use it for? Well, there's hundreds of those found and associated with it, and you have to say, well, these people had the ability to go deep water, to go fishing. They had boats. You can't catch them off the shore. That's not going to happen. You have to go out into a boat into hundreds of feet of water And once you go that deep, might run into these swordfish and these other type of fish that they have that are collected. The harpoons and things lead you to believe that it's not going to work. Here's another site that they had found. Um, it predates all the other people by more than 2,000 years at this site alone. People were surprised to find that most of the bone, a great deal of bone, was related to a maritime activity people. Specifically, codfish was very abundant, and surprisingly, swordfish was extremely abundant. They found a lot of the things from there. They find hooks. Here you go here. And barbs that are made for small fish, barbs that are made for larger fish, and even what looks like punt poles and poking poles to kill seals and things with. Um, this right here shows you a level that's not allowed to be talked about. You can see this right here where it's wood, but it's a scraping stone, and the high quality of that. And here are stone ones, and it's just like the one I had showed you that date back almost 200,000 years in that one site, and 100,000 years in the one site that we started with here. Now this is at Port Croix, and so they're out here. So again, you got to figure this is an island people, and they have boats. And if Eskimos can get around in their boats, these people can get around their boats. And so this is kind of a shh, can't talk about this type thing. That ruins the whole Indians were the only guys here that came across on the Bering Strait, and that was it. Well, what are they trying to cover up? There's thousands of cultures over here and up through Europe that all contain a swastika, but due to the propaganda after World War II, that it becomes a legal site. In fact, I'll show you another video I'm compiling here about how that actual symbol was taken out. And it also correlates with these red ochre people that we're talking about here. So they finally found skeletons that they were good enough to identify. And in the identification of them, they say they are Caucasoids. Well, so are the Amerindians. But they had a more slender head appearance to them. And while that is somewhat of a, there's the skull there, while that is somewhat of a common thing for people, and even in Indians, there are certain tribes that have a slender face rather than a round or oval shaped face. It's very much a European trait than it is to be the common trait of Indians. Look at these barbs here and these fluted edges and these sticks that would stick onto another stick. When you jab it into an animal, it leaves it in. So quite different technology shown on here, and you can see these slabs. This right here is a sharpening stone, like a whetstone. There was a blade right there in his guts, and that blade in his guts would be attached to a pole and be able to help kill seals with. This blade right here seems like it was specialized for fishing and certain things. The archaeologists talk about all this, and if it wasn't terrible video sound, I'd probably put it out for you. But this is down near the Gulf of St. Lawrence. So quite a few things are shown to be not the way that you think that they are. And this red ochre symbology can be found again through shamanism, but where we see it and we know about it in history is the Egyptians used to wear this red ochre, this same ingredients, this same process. And when you look into ancient Minoans, Greeks, and Etruscans, they all had this symbology too, where they would show these men that were at work or men in action were always going to be this color, this red ochre. And as we come up into the modern age, that kind of goes away. They start making different types of vases and arts. Some of them are black on red instead of red on black now. Some of them are all pale shown. Some of them have dark background with pale people and so on. They start showing themselves in more action poses. They start showing the art in more action poses. And if you look at Egyptian art, from the way that they stand still and they're a person looking like they're about to take a step, the odd part is Greeks and statuaries and things showed a person that was definitely in fluid motion, more body recognition, more musculature. Of course, all of them are drawn in some type of Adonis type of look, and nobody ever had a fat roll or a double chin back then. Rarely do they show things like that. The Egyptians also showed everybody to be perfect weight, and they didn't show anybody to be heavy or off gear. Well, that's not true. Hymenu, the architect of the Great Period, if you look up Hymenu, Hemuinu, it'll show you a guy that's very Greek looking. He's got a double chin, kind of man boobs, a little bit chubby around the belly. This is supposed to be the king's son. This is the scribe. These are the scribes of ancient Egypt, and they are all going to be nobility and family from past and current kings and so on. It shows you him. There's also another famous one that has blue eyes into it, and the man is basically bald-headed and very chubby. It's made out of a wood statue that people are very familiar with also. But this red ochre symbology seems to go back from Neanderthal and Cro Magnon times up and through these times here, and then it starts to disappear. Sure, there's an African tribe that they wear rat tails in their hair, and they totally paint up with red too. But that seems to be a localized thing, and it's very much this one little culture. Whereas when we look here, it seems to have been a blanket-wide thing, and it makes you wonder where they got the idea for the red thing. Did they find it on their own and come up with the same concept of painting themselves red instead of black for some reason? Or how did that come about? Is it a symbology to them too? Well, it definitely is. Why would black people have a symbology to turn their skin red whenever people from that time back that had the red skin were the people that used this symbology here? Anyhow, we'll carry on with the discussion more. I'm sure I'm getting quite long with it, so like, share, and subscribe, guys. Take care.